Alright, what is going on, guys? So today we are going to be replacing the Upstream O2 sensors on my 1997 BMW M3. Now when these Upstream O2 sensors go bad, a lot of funky stuff can happen, a lot of codes can be thrown. These sensors are one of the most important sensors in your engine simply because they measure the O2 coming directly out of each chamber, each collector in the manifold. And they have direct control. They have direct control over the AFRs of the engine. So if they start reading incorrectly, you could have fuel trim codes, you can have lean mixture codes, you can have O2 sensor codes. And if the heater matrix starts going bad in them, they'll start reading improperly. So there's a laundry list of issues that can start to happen to one of these motors when the O2 sensors go bad. And so today we're going to be replacing them. So this car is currently throwing P1188 and P1189. Now I'm not going to say this is going to fix the code, but it is a pretty good chance that it is in my case because the cylinder head gasket is leaking a little bit of coolant on this, and over time bank 2 O2 sensor is just caked in coolant. So aside from that, you could have fuel trim codes, mixture deviation codes, things of that nature, and of course directly O2 codes. So we're going to go ahead and replace them today. It's really not that bad if you have the proper tools. Do keep in mind that these sensors, if they haven't been replaced in a long time, they like to kind of seize and, you know, rust will build up. So if you haven't changed yours out in a long time, or you don't know if they've ever been changed out, I would definitely hit it with some PB Blaster and let it sit for a while. Otherwise, they can be a pain to get out. Now, this car is a USDM spec E36 M3 with an S52, so it is a bore-stroked and cammed M52 pretty much. So if you have a 328 or a 323, anything 96 plus that isn't a Euro spec M3, this replacement is going to be exactly the same. As far as tools go, for one, we are going to need to take the passenger front wheel off. We are going to be changing them from underneath the car. Bank 1 sensor is going to be changed kind of through the wheel arch, so you do need to take the wheel off and get it jacked up. So we will be changing one of them through the passenger wheel arch, so you do need to jack it up and get the wheel off. The other thing is I have an O2 sensor socket on a 3/8 drive ratchet. Now notice how the ratchet has a flex head. This is going to be a huge part of this because we're not going to be able to get a direct shot at the O2, so it's going to kind of be like one of these where it's kind of angled. So I don't know if you could necessarily do this with a straight shot, a fixed head ratchet like this. You could also use an open-ended box end wrench, but those kind of be a little bit sketchier because you might strip it a little bit better. It doesn't necessarily have to be a snap-on ratchet. Harbor Freight makes ratchets like these, and pretty much everyone makes ratchets like this. So just get a flex head one. It'll make it a lot easier to get one of these things out. Aside from that, if you have the stock fuel rail cover, it is a plastic cover that covers the entire fuel rail. You will need to take that off. It has 2 little 10mm bolts. So one right there and one right there, and sometimes there are plastic clips that cover that, so you might need to get a little flathead screwdriver, pry those up, take those 10mm off and lift it, slide it out. These are your electrical connections for the O2 sensors right here, so bank 2 and bank 1, and we are going to be routing the wires behind the cylinder head down towards the O2s. So as far as replacing them in order, it doesn't matter which one you start with. I would recommend you only do one at a time. The reason being is it's very easy to lose track of which one goes where. So if you remove one from the manifold, pull the wire out, unclip it from here, and then replace that sensor, you will not risk replacing them or swapping them, getting them swapped backwards. So replace one at a time and you won't have them flipped. If you flip them, it can cause a lot of weird issues. So here we are at the wheel well. If you look, there is number 1. So we are going to be accessing it through this section above the controller and below the frame to get through there. The second bank is a little bit more fun. So here's your oil pan drain plug. If you look between the manifold, you will be able to see it. So for the second O2, we're going to go between the oil pan and the mid pipe. Go straight up this way, and then you can access the rear bank one. It's going to be a little bit harder for me to catch it on camera because of its location, but with the right tools, it's really not that bad to access. You guys will see what I mean. It's kind of a trick to get the socket onto the sensor. Kind of have to squeeze it between the block and the sensor and then on. but it is doable. Alright, so I got the camera set up, so I am going to put my sensor socket onto the O2, let that guy hang, and I'm going to reach through the control arm and put my socket on like that. So now my socket is on the wrench, on the tool, and the tool is on the sensor. So that one actually came out pretty nice. I have sprayed these down. They've been sitting for a day or so. So now that it's loose, we're going to unthread it. And these things are kind of fun to unthread because you will twist the wire and it will try and fight back. There we go, the sensor is off. That one came off actually really easy. So now we're gonna figure out which one is which. So I got my wires kind of hanging. I'm going to tug on the sensor a bit. See, that's our guy right there. So I'm going to unplug him. And I'm going to kind of feed the wire from the back. Sensor doesn't look bad, but the loom is kind of melted and split open, so. And it's always a good idea to lay the new one next to the old one just to make sure everything looks the same. So I'm going to keep the cap on. Also put some anti-seize. A lot of O2 sensors come with anti-seize already installed on the threads, but if it doesn't, make sure it does. I'm going to leave the cap on because we're going to feed it down through the engine bay, and I don't want that brand new sensor banging and hitting things. So we're going to let him hang kind of like that while we get him started. And the install is pretty much the same as the removal, except I am going to feed him behind the other bank manifold so that he will run a little bit nicer. So I put the wires behind the other manifold. So make sure to get them threaded and get them tight before you install the wiring, before you clip it in. That way you can untwist it, because it will get twisted. O2 sensor socket on, ratchet on that. And we're gonna get that guy nice and tight. It does have a crush washer, and you don't have to tighten the crap out of them. Alright, that should be good right there. So I'm going to pull as much slack back off of the sensor as I can. Try and keep the wiring away from the exhaust system from resting on anything like that. And we're going to clip him into place. Kind of tuck the excess wiring kind of back up here so it's out of the way, because what you don't want is the wiring harness laying on the exhaust manifold and getting hot and melting it. Once I have the sensor installed, I kind of like to get a visual of where that wire is going and make sure it's all ran nicely and not touching anything that could cause it to melt. So now we're going to be going after the rear bank sensor, and again we're going to be going between the oil pan. So you can see the sensor. Where is he? Right there. Slide your wrench up this way, get him hooked. It is kind of a trick, but it can be done. You are not going to be able to really access him any other way. So this is the transmission right here. So I'm looking kind of at it towards from the mid pipe where it starts to bend. If you have a box end wrench, this might also be another viable option. to kind of go through it this way and get at it. Do be careful though, because if you strip it, you are going to be in for a hell of a job. You might have to pull the manifolds off the cylinder head, and that's a pain. So this isn't going to be the best angle to see, but it's all that I got. So the O2 sensor is right there, and it is dark, but I'm going to go kind of up this way between the oil pan, the block, and the exhaust manifold tubing to get to it. So I'm going to slide my hand up, hook my tool on. So that's hooked on right there. Now I'm going to slide my wrench up. This is another place where that swivel head is going to come in handy. Alright, so that right there is on. Take him off. Alright. Now I'm going to take the ratchet off the socket. And these things are coming off pretty freaking nice, I'm not going to lie actually. I'm amazed that these are coming off this easy. So now I'm just using the tool to unscrew it. This video is going to look fake because of how easy that came off. Alright. So our O2 sensor is out. That was almost too easy. Now we're going to undo that wire, kind of trace him back, and the sensor comes out. And that sensor is pretty crusty. And again, I'm going to feed that down. I'm going to lay the wire across, pull the cap off of that guy. Where is our hole here? And we're going to thread him into place. I'm going to untwist the wire because it's going to make it easier to get the socket on. Get him a little bit more tight, like that. Nice and tight. All right. Sweet. And again, we're going to kind of trace out our wire, make sure it's sitting nicely, make sure nothing's bound up or touching anywhere that it shouldn't be. I'm going to plug him in, kind of tuck the wires away. Alright, so we have finished replacing our sensors. I'm going to go down there one more time and just kind of tidy up the wiring and make sure everything is looking good. From this point is where you would reinstall your fuel rail cover if you have it, those two bolts, and then the little caps on top of that. You'll notice that the O2 sensor wires, those two little cables right there are the sensor wires. You'll notice that they're running nicely. None of them are touching any exhaust manifolds. They're just running nicely behind the back of the cylinder head, and that's what you want. So you don't want them touching any of the exhaust piping or any of the manifolds because it does get hot and you run the risk of melting it. So that front sensor, the wires are running behind the bank 2 exhaust manifold and up towards the cylinder head. Alright, our Upstream O2 sensors are replaced. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust.